Well, I also would like to thank everyone for coming. I know a lot of people here, but there are also a lot of people I don't know, so I guess I'm glad to talk about the work. Also, this is a project that I worked a lot on with a friend of mine named Leah, who was not able to be here today. But together, she's a landscape architect, and together we were able to sort of construct some ideas around this. But anyway, what this work focuses on largely is this fascination that I had recently around arts and crafts, the arts and crafts movement. And I mean, this isn't the most precise, best constructed furniture, but I think that to me is also interesting. So my fascination with the arts and crafts movement stems from some particular figures during the 1800s. John Ruskin is one, and who was an art critic, sort of like a culture critic, and also William Morris, who I really enjoy his work, or more I guess I enjoy his sort of thoughts about art and the role of the artist in the community and the economy. And this sort of installation is me sort of looking at the history of these ideas. So one thing that comes from William Morris in particular is sort of like furniture making, for example, where there were people who and artists and craftsmen that were interested in creating economies that were centered around actual construction, sort of on money that they're saying money is kind of non-existent, or it doesn't need to exist because your wealth and your value is centered around what you can actually do. So that sort of has definitely got me interested in the furniture, and I started producing sort of new age replications, or sort of my interpretations of some of this furniture, almost as a point of departure into sculpture, because I view myself as a sculptor. I like to be working in 3 dimensions, and there's all this literature, and I was like, I love this stuff, and how can I make this into 3 dimensions, or something that I'm actually interested in producing? So furniture seemed like a good point of departure. And recently, through my friendship with Leah, who worked on this with me, I started getting into the sort of traditions of arts and crafts in landscape architecture, specifically something called the Arts and Crafts Garden, which happened to also be started by William Morris. And there's a whole tradition through about the 1920s, I'd say, where it was like really popular in England and then in the United States. So I was just trying to understand where I am in this sort of world, if there could be a world of that's centered around, craftspeople. Like I'm just interested in that, and also it just seems kind of like a perfect place to be. So I just want to understand it, and part of that has to do, in my mind, with actually making and doing. And I see something that I like, so I want to sort of mimic it, but the act of making is also an act of really analyzing and understanding where these people are coming from. So those are really the words that I say. I would love to talk, questions.
You talk a lot about furniture making. I guess to me this is more about the flora and what's the significance of the particular plants to that guard idea of the arts and crafts garden.
All right. The arts, I guess I did not obviously touch on that. The arts and crafts garden, one thing that it was all about was rather than sending sort of the Victorian garden, the wealthy people would send out these expeditions to find exotic plants and bring them back, and it was this sort of collection of exoticism. But then the arts and crafts garden rejected that, so they were interested in all local plants. And these, in particular, I was like, well, I don't know if I want to, get like battle with sort of native and not native plants. But one thing I am interested in is the, I guess where I live. So I live in a house about 3 blocks from here that is totally overgrown and in shambles. And it's been in my family for 80 years, and it had been vacant before I had moved in for several years. So it used to have stuff like this. I don't really know what was there. I know what is there now. But it was sort of this reconstructing of sort of my backyard, thinking about how that can be reorganized.
Is it an arts and crafts house?
It is not an arts and crafts house, but it kind of had an arts and crafts garden to it. I remember that house from 20 years ago with sort of vines and things, and arts and crafts gardens are just kind of like bushy things with like paths going through it and barrier walls that sort of were holding back all of this like wildness. And it was always kind of like a little wild, a little derelict. So reading about arts and crafts and me getting interested in that sort of made me think of this house that I'm living in. And most of what I remember just isn't there anymore. It's been overtaken by actually vines. Vines, they don't stop growing, they just sort of take over everything. I hate them. So if anyone wants some vines when this is over, it's a joke. Anyway. Any other questions?
What are any thoughts about whether the arts and crafts garden is something that's been passed down over time, or whether it's something that's more being like revived?
I know that there's a history of how this sort of British arts and crafts garden has translated into the United States, specifically backyard, the American backyard, as an extension of living space, which was part of the idea of the arts and crafts garden. So a living room outdoors.